Hello, Explore Ag participants and family members. We're excited to be bringing you an agricultural education panel this afternoon with two of our Ohio agricultural educators that are working in K-12 or middle school and high school buildings around the state. So I'm going to let them talk to you a little bit about their profession. As you have questions, feel free to drop those questions in the chat and we will be happy to answer them for you. My name is Katrina Swinehart Held. I'm the Assistant Professor of Agricultural Education at Central State University, and I am a recovering high school teacher. I spent 5 years in the classroom alongside these two wonderful humans. And so Elise and Jeff, would you want to tell us a little bit about your background and the way that you found your way into agricultural education as your career?
Go for it, Elise.
Sure, I'll start. My name is Elise Schaefer, and I just finished up my first year teaching at Southeastern High School in Clark County, Ohio. Personally, I grew up on a small hobby quarter horse farm in southern Richland County. Grew up in the 4-H system ever since I was a little clover bud, all the way through the whole 10 years of 4-H. But when I hit high school, I joined the Clear Fork FFA chapter and quickly fell in love with everything that the organization has to offer through youth leadership and all the contests that we got to do. And it was my agricultural educator that encouraged me to not only attend Ohio State, but also to major in ag ed. And I quickly fell in love with the program and never looked back. So I just graduated last year in 2019 with my bachelor's in agri-science education.
So I'm Jeff Stimmel. I just finished my 6th year as the Ag Science teacher and FFA advisor at Big Walnut High School, which is a satellite of the Delaware Area Career Center. And one thing, if you choose to go into a career in Ag Ed that you can look forward to, is a really, really long job title, because a lot of our programs are becoming satellites. So when you stitch it all together, it's great. A lot like Elise, I was a 4-H member from the age of, I don't know, until after I graduated high school, actually. And when I was in high school, joined ag science class and the Hillsdale FFA chapter. And I had two wonderful agriculture teachers, Mark Hoffman and Lindsay Bowen, and they encouraged me through the process, kind of always do what you feel is right. But then when I thought I knew what I wanted to do, I talked to them and they were both very encouraging to be an agriculture teacher. When I was in high school and all through middle school and elementary school, I lived on my parents' and uncle's Hereford farm. So they had Hereford cattle, also raised some crops. And then the really cool thing that's kind of an alternative agriculture connection that I have is my uncle actually owns a tractor pulling sled. So I spent a lot of my summers or parts of my summers going from fair to fair at tractor pulls, trying to do those things, which I wasn't great at, but we made it. So it's kind of a cool profession because Elise and I have I think a traditional way of getting here, but there are lots of other ways that people make their way into ag ed.
Mm-hmm.
Great, absolutely. You're right. You're right, Jeff. Students of agricultural education programs might join immediately the profession, go straight to college, or some will do at least 5 years in a career field and then earn their licensure as a post-bachelor's degree situation. That's a great point to make. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about what being an agricultural education teacher means to each of you.
So I've only been a teacher for 1 year now, and that year was cut awful short due to the coronavirus situation. But I think I kind of have a hard time answering this right away because I don't have a lot of experience in the classroom, but I can attest to what I want to be known as an agricultural teacher. And I think being an ag teacher means being a leader, not only in the classroom for your students, but also in the community, because you are growing the next generation of agriculturalists and people in the ag industry. So I just want to make a positive impact on those individuals' lives during their 4 years in my classroom and hopefully even beyond the classroom, like some teachers do for others and my ag teacher continues to do for me.
Yeah, so to piggyback off of what Elise said, I mean, I'm still relatively new. So I always tell people I'm new, and I think I'm going to continue doing that through like 30, 35, 40, however many years I have to teach, because it gets a little bit of leeway. But so I think one thing that Elise said that really resonated with me was the leader piece. So I think sometimes we get emails, at least we do in my district, of whenever we hire a new principal, that so-and-so is entering the profession in a leadership role. And that, I always look at that and it kind of like makes me think for a second, like we're all leaders, and that's kind of what we do in education. So what Elise said, I think really hits home with me there, that that's what we do, and we work with students to help them do whatever it is that they want to do. The other thing that I really, excuse me, the other thing that I really enjoy doing in my current position is I came from a really traditional background, lots of students who were in some way, shape, or form connected to the farm or connected to agriculture, but my current situation is not like that. So actually I had an early field experience student a few years ago who was looking over students' shoulders as they were taking a test, and one of my prominent involved students missed the question, what does AI stand for, artificial insemination? And so after the quiz, she kind of gave her a hard time about it. And that led to basically me asking to prove a point, asked the class, how many of you know what artificial insemination is? And like one of them knew. And then the early field experience student couldn't believe it. So I asked the question, how many of you know what 4-H is? Not how many of you are a member of 4-H, how many of you know what 4-H is? And of the 20 something kids in the room, like 3 raised their hand. So I get a really interesting opportunity to work with students who don't have a background. And I think we talk a lot about that in ag education programs, that we're developing students for future careers, but even the students that don't go into agricultural careers all have an impact. And that's, I think, what really hits home with me, is that you really are shaping the future of the industry through what you do every day.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. One of the terms I hear a lot is that agricultural educators are creating informed consumers. And so it's not only the careers in agriculture, but knowing where their food comes from is another byproduct. I'm going to ask, you both shared excellently what that means to you, but what's been one of your favorite experiences that brought those pieces of the meaningfulness of your career to yourself? So an experience with students or in the classroom or at an SAE event, something that really reinforced to you that you were in the right career.
Two things stand out to me. This past year, I had a junior who was a first-year ag student. She grew up, she has pigs at home. Her dad works for Sunrise. So she has an ag background, and it really confused me that she didn't jump right into ag, but I was glad that she found me her junior year of high school. And I really encouraged her to do the job interview contest in the fall. Because she was a upperclassman, that was the first year, she fit into a different category that kind of gave her a leg up on her competition in the Division 5, which is for first year students who aren't freshmen. And she actually went all the way to the state level, and it was really cool to see her just develop as a person and really step out of her shell, because the first contest she was quite shy and timid going in, but by the time we made it to the state contest, I remember sitting down with her before she went in. I was like, is there anything you need from me, like any questions you want to go over? And she's like, no, Miss Schaefer, I got this. And I was just like, girl, yeah, you do. Like, just own it. And it was awesome to just see her develop, and that was over the course of just a couple months. And I saw similar stories just within my classroom, I guess throughout the whole year, just watching students grow. And that's incredible to me that I'm actually facilitating that. I don't know, I feel weird saying that and not being the student for once. And then another instance, we did a Farmers Share breakfast for our community this year. And it wasn't really a traditional Farmers Share, because when I brought the idea up to my students, they didn't really understand what a Farmers Share breakfast or event is. So it ended up kind of just turning into this community breakfast to bring the farmers in and community members, and also our FFA members, just to kind of talk and get to know each other. And the idea was to bridge the gap between the consumers and the farmers, but being in a small little rural town, there is not really a gap. But we were able to bring in Micah Mensing from Farm Credit, and he spoke to the farmers, and it was just a really positive event. Brought the community together one cold morning in February. And we got a lot of positive feedback from the community for that. And I'm just really excited for the future of that event and where that's going to go. Even though we didn't have much direction going into it, I was really proud of the outcome that my students were able to create.
So one activity, and it kind of is funny, Elise, that you brought up career development event connection, because that's one of the things that I was thinking of in my head. So, excuse me. So a couple years ago, my students actually were the state winners in the food science and technology career development event. And the really special part about that for me was that was the first CDE when I was the teacher that we did. And some of those same kids from that first team I ever had were the students that ended up being on that team for 4 years. And then, so it was with the 4 students, my alternate was 3 kids that I had for 4 years, and then 2 students that I had for 3 years at that point. And we had been working at it, and it was a big like self-discovery thing for me, because I look back down, I'm like, oh my gosh, I literally had no idea what I was doing. And they got to, see and grow with me. So we went to the national career development event, and it was that really awesome intersection. We always talk about, there's a 3-circle model, but the way that it really should work is that they just mesh together. It shouldn't be, we are now in the SAE circle. So those students, they didn't all have food science related SAEs. But the cool thing, if you looked at it, was that all of those circles, what we had learned in the classroom, what the students had done through the FFA, their SAE projects, all meshed together. And we also had brought in, we were working with a professor who works in food science. And so all of those things came together, and those students went to the national contest. And I had never had a team in a career development event qualify for nationals. I had like a speaker and another leadership development event national team, but those are very different and very like speaking oriented, those kinds of things. So this is like technical knowledge. So we're preparing, and everything I asked them to do, they did it without hesitation. If they didn't understand it, like we reached out, we sought help, we did everything that we could do in order to put ourselves in the best position possible. And having those, I call them my babies, my first 4-year babies, make it all the way through and represent Ohio really, really well at the national level was just awesome. And it was one of those like, oh my gosh, like you said, I get to do this. I'm the teacher. What the heck happened here? Somebody call an adult. But that was really cool for us. And then just seeing how that ignited passion in other students, and how that's kind of gotten the ball rolling, and the snowball effect of you have a little bit of success here and you keep going and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's been really exciting. So it was great.
If you touched on something, and Elise, you did too, you talked about the agricultural education model and about how it meshes together. Do you guys want to talk about what that model looks like for you as an educator, and what that kind of means to the youth, for those who aren't familiar with FFA and agricultural education?
Yeah, Jeff, do you want to go ahead and
Yeah. So agricultural education runs on a 3-circle model or a 3-component model, basically that consists of classroom instruction. So when students are sitting in the classroom, technical content that students learn, the FFA, which is the intracurricular, or some people would call it, or more relate to the word extracurricular, there are a few differences there, component, basically is the awards portion that goes with the other 2 circles. And then you have a supervised agricultural experience. So all students should work to have some sort of a career experience, that they're gaining skills to eventually enter into an agricultural career field. So those are the 3 circles, and they kind of come together. So what's interesting to me is when you talk to different teachers, they put things in different circles. So career development events, for example, I'm a firm believer those belong in the classroom circle, because it's applied classroom knowledge. And if you're just having a team, like I don't teach anything about forestry, but then after school I get 4 kids together and darn it, we can ID an ash tree like no one else's business. Like to me, if you look into the history of FFA, it used to be contests, now career development events. That wasn't really what it was meant for. It was to apply what's learned in the classroom. So it's interesting to me when you talk to different people. That doesn't mean that, everything you do in a career development event is taught in the classroom, or everything that you do in your supervised agricultural experiences after school. Those things all should really work together.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with that, especially when you look at our state standards in our curriculum. Those state standards are the same things that we see show up in those career development events, and you can plan out your year because you're free to make local decisions on what your year is supposed to look like. So you can plan out your year to teach some of those standards when those contests are starting to come up. And granted, you're not going to have every kid latch on to every contest, and some standards you just truck through just because you need to get through them to get that web exam score at the end. But I don't know. I think teaching career development events in the classroom works for some programs, but some programs aren't even that dedicated, I guess, to the contests. So it's just kind of up to the students after school to focus on what they want to. I definitely try to plan out my year to hit the state calendar, I guess, of CDE contests, but that doesn't always happen. Especially this first year, I fell behind quite quickly, and I can imagine that's going to be a common theme these first couple years until I get the balance in my classroom that I really want. And each program is different on how much time they spend in each of the 3 circles. Ideally, those 3 circles would be balanced, so they'd be even third splits. But I learned really quickly that my program, for instance, we kind of lack in the SAE component. So that is one thing that I'm really going to start focusing on, especially this next coming year with my freshmen, on really developing those SAEs and teaching those students that SAEs are something that they do need to spend time on outside the classroom, even though we will take some days in the classroom to work on those, especially teach them at the beginning. But I really want to find a better balance in the 3-circle model for my program specifically, and that's going to take a couple years for me to do, but I'm looking forward to it.
That's something also, Elise, that like when we talk about the intersectionality and all of them coming together. So I have a student who took the livestock selection, animal and plant science, those classes, lives on a dairy farm. That's her SAE, did the dairy cattle CDE. So it's really cool that all those come together, and then a student decides to go into something or do a proficiency award or whatever it is. And it's always really cool for me to see when those come together. So like you said, like we have so much local choice of when we do things and how we do things. And that's what I think is really cool. You talked about, different communities are different. So maybe you don't teach the food science class, but you want to do the food science CDE. So that's, you work that around and do things however is best for each community, which is one of the things that I love about being an ag teacher.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Each of you talked about the differences in communities and some of the pieces that are in your job responsibilities, but on an average day, what is it that your job looks like?
So we got to start with the classroom because that's the backbone of the program. I, for one, am not a morning person, but I also hate to not be prepared. So I force myself up and out of bed, and I'm usually one of the first people to roll in the parking lot at the beginning of the day, just so I have extra time in the morning to get myself squared away for the classes. And I teach pretty much all day. There's only a couple periods, my planning period, and then I do have to supervise the middle school lunch period, which is the most dreaded half hour of my day every day. But
Understood. I've had that.
But it also has been good because I only teach in the high school, and we do have kind of a middle school program that does quarterly rotations through an Ag Explore course. So I am able to build some relationships with some students and get to know some. So hopefully that'll transcend here in a couple years to more kids in our program, even though they are kind of crazy when they're playing basketball right after they eat. But I think after school is where the real crazy lies because every day is different. Some days we're heading off to contests. Some days we're having contest practices after school. Usually I try to work in practices days that there's like events after school that I kind of want to wait around on. So like a football game or a volleyball game or something, I'll just open my door up to students who would want to come in and study or work on CDE things after school, and I usually get a handful. Nothing too serious though. But I am one person who doesn't like to dedicate my evening, I guess, to being at school. I know some younger teachers find themselves getting stuck in the classroom, either developing curriculum or whatever, till late hours of the day, and I like to see the daylight. So I am one that currently takes work home with me, and I know that's not a good habit that I'm probably going to continue later on when my life gets settled down. That'll probably change, but right now I'm pretty comfortable with taking my laptop home and working from my porch rather than from my classroom. And I think that's important for me right now, just to get out of the classroom and get a different environment to sit down in. Sometimes I'll get burnout being in I also have a really tiny classroom, let me tell you. So I like to see the daylight. I don't have any windows. But like I said, as my life starts to settle down, I bet I will stop taking my work home. Sorry, that was a bad sentence, but
That's okay, Lise. No, that's good. That sounds like a pretty typical day. Jeff, what about your day?
Yeah, so this year was a little bit different, and every year kind of seems to be a little bit different because the way that we have a separate elementary, intermediate, middle, high school system in our district. So years that I don't have the demand at the high school, I go to the middle school. So some years I'll start at the high school, some years I'll start at the middle school. This year I was at the high school all day, but I got a puppy who, by the way, she's 103 pounds now, but used to be a puppy. She keeps trying to come on camera here. I keep fighting her off, but she had to go to, basically couldn't, I'm also a crazy dog dad, so couldn't be alone because she was just a baby. So I had to take her to daycare. So I was like getting there like right before the bell rang. So a little bit different from Elise on that one. But I'm always the last one to leave. And that's not, I think actually one of the problems that we have, and I was listening to the Owl Pellets podcast, which if you're not familiar is a podcast for ag teachers. I think it's really great. But they were talking about like, if we don't take COVID-19, everybody complains about the system. And if we don't take COVID-19 as an opportunity to blow up the system and rebuild it to get rid of some of those issues, we're missing an opportunity. And I think one of those issues is work-life balance. So for me, I usually get to school, teachers have to be there at 7:20. I usually get there at 7:19. And teachers can leave at 2:50. But what I always do, I always tell my students this, and I always tell any student teachers or field experience students that I'm working with, I will be at school every day until 4:30. That's just how it works for me. And this year it worked out kind of well because I couldn't pick up my puppy until 4. So, have to be there anyway. But, but yeah, just like Elise was saying, so go through the day. I luckily the past years have not had to have lunch duty, but I totally can empathize with the horrors of doing lunch duty. So going through the day, I teach 6 periods, have a lunch period, and have a planning period. And those the classes kind of depend on the year. And then after school, like Elise said, it just kind of depends. So one thing that I have found to be really successful at the size of school that I'm at, a lot of times students aren't doing 6 different things. So I have luckily built this culture in my program where the first year it was like I was pulling kids in and trying to get them to do stuff. And now there's a lot of times like I have to beat them back with a stick. Like I want to go home. I want to go pet my dog. Leave me alone. So they will set up, and they're really good about doing this when we start an after school event, whether that's planning for FFA week or a career development event or whatever it is. They set a practice schedule, and I send that out on Sundays so that parents have access to it. So like, for example, last fall, I had a team that was going to nationals in food science. So they were practicing every Tuesday and Thursday because that worked, or Tuesday, Wednesday, because that worked for their schedule. And then when we started practicing for the state career development event, which they kind of overlap if you're not familiar with the Ohio FFA calendar, they want to do Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I ended up going a little bit later than I like to on Tuesdays because I had the 2 teams that were doing things. And then I had Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then my job interview students wanted to start. And I'm really fortunate I have community members that work with most of my students. So the lady who does job interview could do Monday, Wednesday. So luckily while I was with this food science team, she was working with the job interviewers. But the thing that I really had a hard time balancing was figuring out like when we have staff meetings, when we have professional development events. So this past year, my focus was putting everything on my phone calendar. If it's not on my phone calendar, it doesn't get done. And then when I was building that schedule on Sunday to send it out to students, I would reference that. So kind of keeping that up. But I think that's something that a lot of people overlook is ag teachers are ag teachers, and that's really cool because we do all these, cool lessons, and we have different classes than what most people teach, and we have all these after school activities, but we're still teachers, so we still have to get evaluated, we still get formal and informal observations, we still have to go to staff meetings, we still have to do professional development, and that's hard sometimes to explain to kids. And it's what's really hard about it is when I have a group of kids that we have food science practice every Thursday, and then I have a staff meeting this Thursday, and you can't leave kids unsupervised in your room. It really is hard to tell kids hey, listen, I know that you want to come in and devote extra time to school, but we can't do that today. So it's not something that I ever thought I would have to do is beat students away with a stick, but it's a great problem to have. And I'm not complaining by any means. It just sometimes gets hard to balance. I think that as a profession, that is something that we need to work on. So like Elise said, I don't really stay into the evening very often. We have FFA meetings once a month, so on those nights I will stack practices or stack planning time so that I have something to do the whole time. But in general, I don't stay. I know some teachers that stay until 9 or 10 o'clock at night. I don't do that. I also bring work home, but to me, I can't. I'm all over the place. So if I'm watching TV, I also want to be working on X. So I just have my school computer, my home computer, and we just play it up that way. So
No, those are awesome insights, and I like how each of you pointed out that it's all about you as an individual. If you're a morning person, you can go in a little bit early to get those extra things done, or you can plan them in the afternoon. And so I think that those pieces are important for young people thinking about joining the profession, is that you can really make it what it is that works best for you. And along those lines, for someone who's watching this, one of our Explore Ag youth or any other follower of our page that is interested in following your footsteps into the profession, what kind of advice would you give them as a high school student or even a university student who might want to change their major?
So I feel like I can really talk to this one as I was a college student just last year. Some things to keep in mind, especially when you hit college, are the internships that you want to do and also the experiences that you want to have in college. I have a lot to talk about right now, but first thing, get involved on campus in different clubs and organizations, not only to meet people, especially if you're going to Ohio State like I did in the College of Ag, you'll get to meet a lot of ag students that are going to be your colleagues in 4 short years, so you're going to make a lot of connections that way, but also take leadership roles within those organizations, because that's just going to give you experience when you take over leading your chapter. For instance, I was the fundraising chair of my sorority in college, and that gave me a lot of different ideas on how to step outside the box fundraising wise, and also when it comes to breaking apart and really doing the grunt work in an organization within the committee versus within just the officer team. And I really hope to develop our committees in our chapter over the next few years and really get some of those first year students really devoted to certain activities that happen throughout the year and give them some buy-in to the different things that the chapter's doing. Also, I know it's easy to go back home, especially with our traditional ag students, and get an internship with the local seed salesman and scout fields all summer. But I think it's really important to try to get out in education somehow, whether that's working with Metro Park on their summer camps or becoming a Teach Ag ambassador. Back when I was an intern, we called it an internship, and now it's the ambassador program. But that ambassador program was so important to me because I got to know state staff really well. And I also got my first insight on professional development events. As a college student, I was going to professional development events with current ag educators. And I feel like that just made the whole environment of the ag education realm more comfortable to me because I got to see faces and get to know people before I was in that role, especially state staff. Now going back to the Ohio FFA Center, it feels like I'm going home, kind of, rather than going to these big scary meetings. It's really comfortable for me. And then, in my completely biased opinion, I would totally recommend being on staff at FFA camp in the summer, because you get to know the state so well in this little camp out on Leesville Lake, because the state comes in different groups, and you really get to know individual chapters and what they feel like and what different areas of the state feel like, because the students are so different. And as these different groups come in, you really get a feel for not only what their programs are like, but also maybe even what their communities might be like. So later on down the road, when you're looking for a position in the industry, you can be like, oh, I remember when those people came to camp. I think I'll fit in there, or something like that. And you also get to meet the faces of different agricultural educators from across the state. So I know when I was in my final year at Ohio State, as a blocky, I guess you call them, even though it's not a thing anymore, whenever we go places, I'd always know so many more ag teachers than the other people who are the same age as me in the same program, about to embark on the same exact career, just because I had that experience of, or those experiences, I guess, of both being a Teach Ag ambassador and working at FFA camp. Oh, last thing. Also go on study abroads, because I think you need to step outside of your own world and experience other people's cultures, because there's different cultures even in our state, and it's so important to open your mind and your heart to different people, and study abroad experiences and throwing you in there and getting a real eye-opener to different cultures is, I think, the most fun way to do that.
Awesome.
So one thing, and I'm sure Elise would agree with this, but I think that it's not said enough, is, so Elise talked about getting involved, and I 120% agree with that. Find something to do, but this is what I'm going to tell you that everybody should tell you, but not everybody tells you. It is not the number of things that you do that matter. It is what you do within those things. So I remember, I also went to Ohio State, but this would go the same if you were at Wilmington or Central State or wherever you decide to go. I remember people telling me that I wasn't involved on campus, and it would make me like really upset, because I felt like I was really involved on campus. And then when I looked around, I noticed that students that were involved in 19 different organizations didn't really get super deep, but they were constantly at a meeting. And on the opposite side, I basically did three things. I was an RA, I was in Ag Ed Society, and then I was in the National Residence Hall Honorary. And those were the three things that I did, and I feel like I did them really well. And that doesn't mean you can't pick up. I was a USG senator for a semester, because the senator had another obligation. I didn't do the whole thing. I went to one of the senator meetings, but like, you pick up things every once in a while when something happens. But if you ask me for a concrete takeaway, and Elise alluded to this when she was talking about being fundraising chair, like, I can tell you start to finish how something happens, how it works, whatever. And the other really cool thing for me was Ag Ed Society is the oldest student organization at Ohio State, and I was part of the group that started the National Residence Hall Honorary. So giving yourself a diversity of experiences, the chapter at Ohio State, I did not start the honorary, but giving yourself a diversity of experiences. So I knew if I was walking out into an established program, which Big Walnut High School was one of the first, Sunbury High School, I guess, which consolidated into Big Walnut, was one of the first programs that started FFA in Ohio. So I had experience working with an older organization. And at the same time, if I were to walk into a new organization, I helped start our chapter of the National Residence Hall Honorary. Other than getting involved, other things that I would really recommend is make sure that you keep an open mind, that you get involved with things around campus or around the Ag Ed world, I guess. So for example, when I was at Ohio State, the CDE coordinator at the time was looking for judges for the Ag Sales CDE. So I went and I helped with that, and it allowed me to learn more about that CDE. Lots of different things. I mean, there were other events that I helped with, or if they needed volunteers at state convention, those things, not only do you get to meet people like Elise was talking about, but then you learn the inner workings of how things work. And then when you show up your first year, you have a little bit of insight into it, and it's not completely new and blind. So those are some important things I think that people don't tell you, but please, 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 if you take nothing else, this is my thing. Like, what quality matters, not just quantity. Please keep that in mind. Thank you for attending my TED Talk.
No, both of those are excellent sets of advice. One of the last questions I want to ask you is, both of you talked about the advice and the tidbits they should pick up on their way to becoming a teacher. But as a teacher, what are 2 or 3 characteristics of a person who would make a good teacher?
I think the first one is always putting your students first, both inside and outside the classroom, but definitely dedicating yourself to trying new things and differentiating your instruction so you can reach as many students as you can. It's not always going to be perfect, but as long as you keep trying, your students are going to recognize that. Sometimes you're going to have things that fail, and it's okay to fail. Like, it's good to fail. Failure's the best teacher. And it's okay to be like halfway through your lesson and clap your hands, be like, all right, guys, this is not working.
Yep.
We are going to get on AET, and you're going to update stuff, and we're going to try this again tomorrow in a different way. And students, I think sometimes we take for granted how adaptable they are and how forgiving that they are. They'll be like, all right, Ms. Schaefer, whatever, we'll do whatever. So it's okay to fail. One of my mentor teachers, he always says the quote, "The sun will come up tomorrow." And sometimes, even though a day or a 45-minute classroom period might be really difficult, you can always close the book on today and try again tomorrow. And then the second, or another quality, I guess, would be to be flexible, because plans and things change, just as we found out so roughly and abruptly this spring. Things change, and no matter what, you're still these students' educators, and you still need to provide educational opportunities for them. And as long as you're trying, you're doing your job.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, as long as you're trying, you're still doing your job. I like that. What do you think, Jeff? 2 or 3 traits of a good teacher?
Yeah, so I wrote these down, so there's a little bit of overlap. But the first thing that I wrote down was trying new things. So I remember when I student taught, I thought that I knew what kind of a teacher I wanted to be, and I was ready to go. Everything was good to go. And then I went to a CASE Institute. So if you're not familiar, CASE is a organization that writes curriculum for agriculture classes, and there's a focus on inquiry-based learning. So went to my first CASE Institute the summer after I graduated from Ohio State, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. So that, being willing to try new things definitely opened my eyes. Also, in the classroom and FFA realm, definitely try new things. So I didn't have experience with some of the things that we now do that my students expressed interest in. And my first year I was really reluctant because I thought that I knew what I wanted to do, and I thought that I was going to make students fit what I wanted them to do, and that doesn't work, so don't do that. So, if you're open to, like, for example, this year I had a bunch of kids and it was canceled because of COVID-19, but I had 10 students that were really into floriculture. I don't know anything about flowers, but let me tell you, we learned. So it was really fun. The second thing that I wrote down is being positive, and this was a trap that I fell into early in my teaching career, where I would get mad about things, and I think that unfortunately, when you do those kinds of things, your reputation can kind of precede you. So somebody told me the other day that I really mellowed, and I guess my first year I said something or did something that made people upset, and I didn't even realize that I had done it. So be positive, try to do your best. There are going to be things that make you upset, that make you mad, and also have grace with other people there. That's something that I did at this point 5 years ago, and for whatever reason, if people are still holding it over your head, I think that's more of a representation on them, but it happens. So work with that. And then the last thing I have on here is being a hard worker. So I have a lot of friends who are just naturally really, really smart. So one of my best friends, we went to Ohio State together, and that's where I met her. And then she went to Columbia, and she got 2 master's degrees. And if you're not familiar, Columbia is an Ivy League school. So I'm the dumb one in the friendship, but it's fine. So I just feel like because of that, I've had to work hard at some things, and it's really easy to just quit when you don't understand something. but like for me, I never liked chemistry. It was not a thing that I did. And then my students got really into the food science CDE, and I started teaching a food science class, and I had to get good at chemistry just to be able to teach those concepts. So I was willing to put the nose to the grindstone and just work on understanding that. And I know that there are a lot of times people, not just in the ag ed profession, but in a lot of professions that are, well, I don't know that, so I'm just not going to do it. Just do your best to always be open to learning new things, and work hard, and you'll be great.
Awesome. No, I think all those are right. It's definitely anyone who can definitely focus on others, can definitely become an outstanding educator. I appreciate that. So the last thing I want to end on a positive note. And so would each of you share your absolute number one favorite thing about being an agricultural education teacher? I know, Elise, it's hard with half a school year, but even if it's like the number one thing you look forward to, or anything along those lines.
So
My number one thing would be my students. Just as I said a while back, just watching them grow, and watching them make connections. Like, I had one girl in my animal anatomy class this past year, and at least once a week, if not once a day, she would just like exclaim like, "Oh, I get that." And I was like, "Yes, you do. Thank you for getting that." But just watching them latch on to concepts and really make connections, not only in real life, but also with other classes, or between other classes, is really rewarding for me. And I just enjoy seeing their faces. I have some that come visit me before the bell rings in the morning. And even though sometimes I'll be really busy and I'll be like, "Go away, I need to make copies," I really appreciate that they want to come see me.
I would say that my number one most favorite part of my job also would be my students and seeing growth and development. So my group that just graduated, I had a lot of them since 8th grade. That was the first year that I taught middle school. So for 5 years, I had the same group of kids, and they have just done so much, and they've done so well, and just seeing like things come together. So last year, or I guess at this point 2 school years ago, we canceled a lot of FFA events or didn't get to do them fully because officers didn't plan, and we would realize a week ahead of time no one had done anything. And this year, I mean, like, one of the things we had to almost cancel 2 years ago was our pumpkin painting that we do every year. And this year a student came to me like, "All right, I'm ready to order stuff." And it's like a month ahead of time. And I was like, "Okay, cool." Like, "Well, we need paint." And I start to type in paint Amazon. She goes, "No, I have, here you go," and hands me a sheet, and it has every item I need to buy, the quantity, the item number, the price. It's all within budget, like has the budget pulled out from our POA. Like, oh, okay. And that's just really cool. That student is now my FFA president, and like seeing how all of those things connect and seeing student growth versus, when those students were in 8th grade, probably wouldn't have happened. But that is always really rewarding, is working with students.
Awesome. If students wanted to get a hold of you later to ask future advice or seek your counsel, what would be a good way for them to connect with you?
Slide into my DM. No, I'm just kidding. I don't actually even know what that means, but so that's one of the things kids say all the time. I'm hip if you can't tell. No, so my email is jeffstimmell@bwls.net. And yes, all of those things are doubled. I realize I have a lot of double letters and I have a really hard name to spell apparently, but jeffstimmell@bwls.net.
Perfect.
And mine is eshafer@sels.us. So eshafer@sels.us.
Awesome.
Any questions and all questions are welcome.
Oh, that's so awesome. And that's what I love most about being in the ag education profession, is that all of our ag teachers are always so welcoming to others and questions. And so if you go to a school that has an ag teacher, feel free to reach out to them too. I'm sure that they would love to help you. And Elise and Jeff, I just want to thank you for your time and sharing your profession with our Explore Ag students today.
It was
Of
wonderful.
course.